CNN sucks. It seems that in the CNN town hall that Bernie Sanders went through, I didn't think any of the questions at the CNN town hall were necessarily off color or wrong. I thought all of those questions could legitimately be asked. And I've said on more than one occasion that sometimes being asked a question in a particular way gives you the ability to knock it out of the park and show people what you're made of. And the hard questions, being able to answer those hard questions, are the things that get you a certain degree of credibility, if that makes sense. That said, there's still something deceptive in what took place from the standpoint of the town hall. Do you remember, there's an episode of Boss. Boss is one of my favorite shows. With Kelsey Grammer, best show that Kelsey Grammer has ever starred in, meaning from the standpoint of his acting ability. It gave him the opportunity to show off his acting chops like nothing else. He's the mayor of the city of Chicago. And being the mayor of the city of Chicago, he runs it like a mob boss, using political clout in order to affect his will, whatever that will is. With the added bonus that he's also having a psychological breakdown because he has some kind of degenerative brain disease that he doesn't want to tell the public about. That in no way affects his political clout, however, and he wills it with an iron fist. In one of the episodes, the governor crosses him, and the governor does something he has no business doing. And he's taken on a mission in order to get the governor out of his seat and make sure that the governor loses and add in a different primary opponent that he can control in order to take the governorship of Chicago. Of Illinois. So in one of the cases, there was a picture that went out of him, the governor, in some state that he wasn't supposed to be in or some area he wasn't supposed to be in. An Asian man fixes his collar and goes about his way. And they get a picture of the Asian man adjusting his collar, and they come out saying the governor is gay and he's hiding a gay Asian lover. Now, the mayor knew about this. The mayor did this, and the mayor did this explicitly to attack him because the first question is going to be, well, what were you doing in that particular area? In which case, the mayor or the governor couldn't answer that question because the governor was doing something he had no business doing. One of the questions at one of the announcements when the governor was stomping, a person was planted to ask the governor a very specific question that the governor couldn't answer. Who's the guy that you were with and why were you there? In which case the governor squirms and he's on the phone, hit him again. Essentially ask the question again, continuously ask the question and put the mayor in a difficult position or the governor in a difficult position that he can't necessarily get out of. The Bernie Sanders town hall was almost, it felt like a sliver of that. Not so much that the questions were wrong, not so much that the questions couldn't be answered, but that the people who were involved in answering those or asking those questions, CNN made it look as if these were just regular town folk, these just regular Democrats and independents throughout the country who had various information that they wanted to know, and they were asking these questions. And yes, they might have been from that particular area, but still, it came across as if they were just everyday people who were just, golly gee, I have questions for Bernie Sanders. And that wasn't the case at all. Many of these people were political operatives, in some case, lobbyists, that CNN in no way exposed their identities. I get that the questions weren't necessarily off color, but that's somewhat almost irrelevant to the point. Why are you being deceptive and why are you being squirrely? Look at this, for example. This question.
It's on the 20.
Here's one.
Midterms, the Democratic Party has become more female, more racially diverse, and younger in age. How can a voter like me feel confident in your ability to represent the party, especially given that your response to sexual harassment allegations during your campaign is that you were, quote, a little bit busy running around the country trying to make the case to be elected as president?
Well,
how's that not a knife? How's that not a knife? It's not that that's a horrible off-color question, but it is, of all the questions, somewhat of an uncomfortable question to answer. It's like, how often do you beat your wife? Hey, there was sexual harassment in your campaign. Why didn't you do anything about it? I mean, you were running lollygagging around the country. Who asked this question? Now, CNN cast this person right here. So, CNN cast this person as, this is Pace Magazine. Or I'm trying to get the person's name. Question comes from right. Come on. Question behind. Let's see. I'm trying to see CNN's naming of this person, and I can't find the person. But at the end of the day, CNN didn't give her occupation. CNN just said that she was a student at one of the universities. The reality of it is, the problem here is that when the question comes from an intern at a major DC lobbying shop, and that is not disclosed, can't help but wonder who asked that question of Sanders. This person, the woman who just asked that question, was cast as a student. In fact, she worked as an intern at a DC lobbying firm. Who chose her to ask that question, and why wasn't the fact that she worked at a DC lobbying firm disclosed? Why? Those are valid questions. Here's the others. CNN called Tara Iborlasol a former biology professor when her LinkedIn page lists her current job description as chair of the Baltimore County Democratic Party. Abena McAllister was labeled as an active Democrat, which is far less descriptive than Charles County Democratic Central Committee's of her as their chair. Yulong Sil was called a George Washington student by CNN, despite her LinkedIn page saying she also works for Katz Watson Group, fundraising and consulting outlet. Michelle Gregory was simply listed as a Maryland voter by CNN, but a cursory Google search reveals her to be much more active in politics than just voting. Similarly, the questions on reparations was offered by an Aspen Institute alum. She worked for a nonprofit whose board of directors includes executives at Bose, Allen Hamilton, and Carlyle Group. This is amazing. You've misrepresented the identities of the people who are asking these questions. And I don't consider CNN an honest arbiter in this stuff. And understand why. I think all incentives. If you call me cynical for it, fair enough, I'll take it. But the fact of the matter is, you have mega corporations that have a perspective of things. CNN pushes almost every war that the United States engages itself in. You have a person who's not on board for these interventionist or regime change wars. Well, you have a conflict of interest there between those two things, meaning there's a difference of opinion on those things. You have another situation of billionaires paying millionaires to tell people how awesome capitalism is and how awesome their system is. And you have a candidate who's directly in contradiction to that statement, even running as an open socialist. I'm just saying, I have no reason to believe that CNN is impartial in this. Meaning, if one person, the identity is a little screwy, fair enough. But when you have like 5 or 6 people who are supposed to be asking questions of Bernie Sanders, and those people have links either directly to higher aspects of the Democratic Party or lobbying groups, when, if we're being honest, Bernie Sanders has stepped on the toes of all of these entities, yeah, I'm a little skeptical of this. The problem, again, is not necessarily the question. That question was somewhat brutal. But again, it gives them an opportunity to knock it out of the park. But it's not a question that people would necessarily ask. The problem here is that CNN was squirrely about revealing the actual identities of the people who were asking the questions. And yeah, that matters. What else are you going to be squirrely on when it comes to reporting the information about the Sanders campaign? There's no reason at all to trust CNN. In fact, what the matter is, this makes their case worse, not better. You could have just as well revealed the identities of the people who were asking the thing, which would have given you a far more honest engagement. Again, it's not that the questions were bad. The catch becomes, why are you not being honest about who's asking the questions? And who at CNN made the decision to hire or get all of these people who just so happen to have links to the Democratic Party or some kind of lobbying group to be the ones who are asking the questions? Did CNN stack the deck against Bernie Sanders? I guess is what's being asked. When the CNN was engaged on this, and their answer wasn't so much that it didn't necessarily stack the deck. Their thing was, we could have been more honest about the people who were asking the questions. That's to put it mildly. Either way, I think Sanders knocked this out of the park. It's just somewhat aggravating. Jamal, have you seen the statement on CNN? No, I haven't seen the statement. I was looking for more information on this. I'll check out the statement. I did see the response that CNN made to Pace Magazine, specifically saying, that for the most part, these weren't the statement that they made, saying that we could have been more honest with the identities of the people who were asking those questions. And understand, by the way, when they're doing these town halls, the town hall is trying to replicate America. Who in America? What is America thinking? What are typical Americans thinking? The guy who's, serves your coffee and the guy who writes your computer program. What are these guys thinking? Because this is going to make up America, and this is going to be to some degree a choice on who takes office. When you say this person is a biology professor, this person is a student at this university, this person is so, they're giving you the identities of the individual because they're trying to give this impression that the identity of the individual to some degree represents what that individual wants. That me saying this person is a biology professor to some degree tells you what's inside the person itself. What is that person about? And they do so based on the job description or the identity of the individual that they're telling you. Now, to be fair, this may be true to some degree, but this may be true, maybe false in others. Clearly, saying a biology professor doesn't necessarily give you a clear description of what that person is. It's just your image of what a biology professor is. But nevertheless, this is the way it's done because I don't necessarily know another way for them to try to give you some idea on what this person is in this kind of snapshot. If you tell me this person is a biology professor when this person is also or simultaneously working as a chairman of some branch of the Democratic Party, well, the branch of the Democratic Party may give you more information as to who that person is as opposed to the fact that that person was a biology professor. Like I'm saying, it's disingenuous. It's being dishonest on his face. I suspect what CNN knows is that Bernie Sanders is not necessarily on the wish list of the Democratic Party. They hate his guts. And if you tell people that this is some aspect of the Democratic Party, if that question is somewhat of a difficult question, it makes it look like there's a bias built into the question itself, as opposed to it being a typical biology professor that just has questions about Bernie Sanders. There's a difference in those things. CNN was being duplicitous on its face. And the question is, did they stack the deck in regards to the people who were going to be asking those questions? And who was the person that was asking those questions? I think those are valid. I think those are entirely valid points. All right, I have another video I want to do after this. There's been a few of these. CNN is far from neutral, forsaking companion. Yes, CNN is far from neutral. The Venezuela thing by itself. When the United States is taking on a position of regime change in Venezuela, if any of the people, reporters that are on CNN, either they don't know the history of the U.S. interventions in Latin America, or they choose not to tell. And they choose to pretend that the history of interventions in Latin America from the standpoint of the CIA and U.S. policy in Latin America somehow stopped at some point in history. They don't tell. They don't tell because this looks almost exactly like the procedures that were taking place prior, with the extra weirdness that is out in the open. If a person who's running for office says, I don't want to engage into these regime change wars, then CNN's perspective on this is out of alignment with that particular individual. But I'm supposed to believe that CNN is going to be a neutral arbiter, engage that fairly, when I don't even think they've been engaging this other issue fairly. So when CNN issues a town hall, and we find out after the fact that the identities of the people have been hidden, and that the identities that were hidden gives more information into the character of the individual than the identities that they were presented, yes, I'm suspicious of this. If you want to call me cynical, fair enough, but it's not cynicism without reason. All right, let's see. Meditating Jesus. Trump's Secretary of Labor found guilty of peddering? What's peddering? I don't know what peddering is. Do you mean pedophiling? I don't know what peddering is. I'll check it out. Come on. Everything's running slow. Why are you running so slow? Everything's frozen. All right, I will check that one out when I guess my system starts back working. But keep an eye on CNN, man. Keep an eye on CNN. This does not speak well Oh, pedophile ring. No way. Wow, that's not good. That's not good at all. Yeah, that's not good at all. What is Donald Trump going to say about that? He's probably not going to say anything about it. All right. All right, yeah, my system's freezing. All right, when this comes back on, or when this starts back working, I have another video that I want to do coming up. I have a few. In fact, there's 1 or 2 videos that I still want to do back on the CNN thing with Sanders. I just didn't want to do them all yesterday because it would have been like 5 videos. But the question about reparations is an interesting one. And that's one of those ones that I actually want to talk about and delve into. There's some people on the channel that believe that Sanders is wrong, I guess, for not embracing this. I am not one of those people. I think that is a political bombshell, that Elizabeth Warren is somewhat desperate, which is the reason why she's bringing those terms up. And the thing that Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are talking about are not really reparations. And the question even further still, what does that even mean? And after you figure out what does it mean, how do you administer it in a way that doesn't create absolute chaos in a society with regards to poor whites being angry that blacks are getting some kind of payback. Mercedes Cali, Ecuadorian, speaks about asking President Moreno to resign. Oh, wow. I mean, but what did they ask him to resign over? I mean, they can't just ask him to resign for no reason. Elephants will go, I'm torn on reparations, depends on what that means. Yes, exactly. I keep saying the same thing. What I do think is Kamala Harris and Liz are bringing it up out of left to out left Bernie. I think they're trying to do that, but the problem is you bring that up, you lose in the general. Also, using the term is a little bit different than explaining what the term means, if that makes sense. Anybody can say reparations. Republicans say we're giving reparations and then get some kind of tax cuts where a dollar goes to a black person. I'm talking about actual, what does it mean? In real world objective terms, what does it mean? Are you going to give every descendant of a slave a paycheck or a check to pay them back? Let's say, $1,000 each. Like, what does it mean? If you're talking about creating some kind of, are you talking about something specific to African Americans or something that others can access? I mean, after all, other people started to access affirmative action beyond people who are sons of slaves. So it's like, what does reparations mean? And beyond what does it mean, how do you usher in the politics to make the rest of the population that's not going to partake in that, if you're talking about something specific to one of the races, how do you make that okay with it? Whether they're right or wrong, to not be okay with it. How do you make it okay with it? Whether somebody's right or wrong is almost irrelevant to the process. How do you feel a particular way? And if people feel a way, it doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. They're still going to feel some kind of way against it. I'm not against reparations. I'm actually for it. I think it would be fair as anything, it's like you've ripped somebody from their land. You forced them into a brutal slavery that go on for the course of centuries. And even after the slavery ended, you lock them out of certain institutions within the country itself. We're square. There's nothing to see here, folks. But there is something to see here when you look at the wealth gap disparity between African Americans and whites. I put to you that disparity comes because of the history of African Americans in this particular country. And so it's not insane or wrong for somebody to say, well, look, we need to kind of mend this. We created somewhat of a indelible scar within our country. We need to mend that scar by being honest about the history of this country and dealing with the consequences of the history of this country. That's not insane at all. That's a logical political perspective in a country that wants to honestly regard the history of itself and to try to move past that history of itself by mending one of the disparities that was created by the inception of the country. But come on, this is America. And I have to believe that white Americans are going to be okay with this. And even some white Americans that may be, not racist or anything else, they will say, well, look, I didn't have anything to do with that. So how are you going to give taxpayer money to something that I had nothing to do with? That's somewhat of a shallow portrayal of this, because at the end of the day, whether you had something to do with it or not, you're a member of this country, and the government of this country committed a heinous act on Native Americans and on African Americans. I'm just saying, it's not about you as an individual, it's about the actions of the government itself. I I'm not torn on reparations. I think it's perfectly fine. Here's the catch, though. Of all of the candidates, what Bernie Sanders is putting forth in a standpoint of a platform where he's talking about, taxing the rich, making sure healthcare and education are free from the public standpoint. Do you realize that with the wealth disparity of African Americans, that African Americans are going to benefit magnificently from this thing of healthcare and from this thing of education and allowing themselves certain opportunities? No, it's not necessarily race specific, but it is a sea change in regards to policies that are taken, in this case, I guess it will be under the Democratic Party by one Bernie Sanders. I mean, my point is this. Whether you're talking about reparations or not, it's almost irrelevant to the point that the gains that are going to be made under a plan like Sanders, almost a New Deal plan that Sanders is going to put forth, is going to be radically better than something that a Cory Booker or Kamala Harris will put forth that are not race specific, even though they may be using the term reparations. So I think Elizabeth Warren is anyway. I don't know. I'm not torn on it. I don't necessarily know what it can do. 90% of the world disagrees that African Americans deserve reparations. Yeah, that's kind of the problem. I mean, that's kind of my point. It's like you're trying to make that argument. Whites are going to look at it as they're trying to take our cup of coffee. It's been X number of years. They need to get over it, etc., etc., etc. They don't regard their history honestly. Alex McLean, how are you doing tonight? Jamal, just tuning in. What's happening? Alex, I'm doing okay. A little tired, but I'm all right. Let's see, propaganda. The United States was built on the backs of blacks and other minorities. Yes, they were, which is why I have no issues with this idea of reparations. Reparations is going to be a third rail topic. Yes. Cannabis, however, is something everyone is accepting this time around. Yes. This is kind of, it's like, it's a weird position. And I know my position on this is somewhat nuanced. And God, we've so strayed off the point. I'm going to do a video on this by itself. It is mind-blowing to me that we're even talking about it and that the word is even being used. That's the first point. The second point is it shows the degree to which the country has moved in rhetoric to the left, meaning the underbelly of the country itself seems to be teeming with certain ideas, particularly from the standpoint of what's considered to be the left, that have shifted under the Sanders part. Meaning Sanders has been able to move the Overton window such that a little further beyond that is something else. Now, Elizabeth Warren understands something I think that's very straightforward and basic. That Hillary Clinton lost part of the black vote, and underperforming in that way, to some degree, was part of the reason why she lost. She also understands that there have been somewhat of a leaving, a dim exit, among African Americans within regards to the Democratic Party. Aisha's dad told Aisha one day, I'm done with the Democratic Party. Just outright, I'm done. This is a man who 2 years prior, him and I had a conversation where I was saying that this idea of voting for a Democrat when they're not going to do anything for you is nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. And as long as you give your vote in this way, you've essentially given any leverage that you've had over at the point where you're voting at 90% for the Democratic Party. It's like, why? Why? I understand Republicans have some, creatures in that party, but it doesn't necessarily mean you automatically vote for the Democrat. 2 years later, he's like, I'm done with the Democratic Party. So Elizabeth Warren throws out the nuclear option. Reparations. I need to be able to get a percentage of the black vote that Hillary lost. I need to get them. How do I get blacks? Hey, I know why. I can give reparations. I can throw that over the vote. I can use that as one of the things to hang out to say, look, I am listening to the fact that you're leaving. I am listening to the fact that you're displeased with us. Give me a chance. Here it is, reparations. Now, Sanders looks at this and asks the most basic question in the world. What the hell does it mean? And I would put to you that Elizabeth Warren probably doesn't know. And fact of the matter is, if that's the argument that you're going to be putting forth, you're going to be hit on that relentlessly the entire election campaign. And I just don't think it works. I'm sorry. Do I agree that it's necessary? Yes. Do I agree that even from a moral standpoint it should take place? Yes. Politically, is it something that you run on? I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see it. God knows I don't see it. Free education and jobs program and healthcare. Yes, yes. Because think about what that means. Education, jobs program. And you're talking about a section of the society that is dirt poor in many respects and that lost massive amounts of wealth under Obama. What does it mean to get free education when you don't have $50,000 of debt on your back? What does it mean to be able to get health care when you need it without having to pay all of these hospital bills free at the point of service. Like, those things are massive sea change for people who are in economic straits. Whether or not you come out and say, okay, I'm doing a reparations program, you have to admit that what Sanders is putting forth is going to disproportionately assist the people at the bottom end of the economic spectrum. Whatever name you want to call it, what is the overt effect in real world? Meaning, what is the outcome? How does it affect people in everyday life? That put to you that affects people, particularly at the bottom end of the economic scale, in massive, massive ways. Just saying. Chinty, if you can't get the other stuff, how the heck would anyone ever freaking reparations are possible? Yeah, I know. Jamarl, in the UK, focus tends to be on encouraging equal opportunity and, for example, targeted advertising campaigns to encourage ethnic minorities to join the police force. No, I get it. And that's not a horrible way to go about it. We can satisfy our abstract moral ideas, or we can solve black poverty. The best way to solve black poverty is to eliminate all poverty. Reparations will not restore black neighborhoods. Again, Garden, it's like, what does reparations even mean? That is not a trivial question. What does it mean? All right, I'm going to end this. Was it Gardner is missing the point? I don't know, maybe. I don't think he's entirely wrong, but I don't think he's entirely right either. I mean, look, this is not an issue of I understand Gardner's point, but that point is not entirely right, and that point is taken from a perspective that kind of misses a historic wrong, right? I mean, this is not purely entirely about this kind of intellectual, okay, we're just gonna, we need to restore black neighborhoods, or we need to do this, we need to do that. It's something about a wrong that's taken place, and that in that wrong that's taken place, there's been this kind of ignoring that. I mean, when I say America doesn't regard its history honestly, this is kind of what I'm getting at. This, it's like, yeah, we can deal with black poverty, or we can deal with all poverty. But the question is, how do you deal with black poverty and not deal with all poverty? I think that's the point that Gardner was making. I think I agree with that point. But it goes beyond black poverty. I think, I guess I look at this as there's been a stain and there's been a crime that's been committed, twofold. One, in the sense of the subjugation of a group, and the other one in the destruction of another. In the crime that's been committed, years, you're talking about centuries of abuse and hostility towards a group within the country, and even excluding that group from participating within the society in almost this apartheidish way. It is easy to look back at that and say, well, I had nothing to do with this, or, oh, we shouldn't do anything about it, we should deal with all issues. But the people who are the descendants of those people, where they happen to, are not going to look at it that way. And I'm not even sure if they should. Like, do I look at this as, oh, we just need to deal with poverty? Yes, I think we need to deal with poverty just someone as an absolute, full stop. And dealing with poverty as an absolute deals with black poverty by definition of dealing with poverty as an absolute. So, fair enough. But there's something else to be asked here on whether or not there should be consequences for bad behavior, and what should be the response of a government when it's committed atrocities. And how do you come face to face with dealing with the fact that you've committed atrocities? And not just that. It's not that this stuff happened just in the past. There are vestiges. There is no separation of points within a time stream. The fact and the reason why people are in some of the situations they're in now, especially from the standpoint of poverty, was not an act of God. It was an act of decisions that were made all throughout the course of history of this country. Things that this country did back then adversely affect the lives of people now. Meaning the poverty level between African Americans and whites are not just an act of God. It has nothing to do with one being inferior to the other. It has to do with the start that was given by one. Wealth increases on itself, meaning the more wealth you have, the more wealth you may end up with just by the virtue of the way wealth increases. That also means that if you start with zero, you're going to have a hard way to get from point A to point B. I don't know if I disagree with the full thing of reparations as being purely a tool of leveling the wealth thing. There's a moral question here of whether or not there should be a penalty, or I guess you can say payback, for decades or centuries of abuse. It's not just the question of, how do we encourage, how do we pay back for what we've done from the standpoint of leveling off things. There's also a question of payback from the standpoint of retribution. When the United States puts somebody in jail, they don't say, okay, look, this crime happened in the past, and because this crime took place, we're just going to let it slide. The pain of the individuals that were involved in the process gets added into a certain weight within regards to what the judge gives in regards to a prosecution. Why is that not true from the standpoint of governments? I don't understand. Yes, you can make an argument that says, yes, this needs to be an outcome-based policy where we want to try to make people whole that were disparaged based on the founding of the country and the way the country operated itself. That's one point. But the other point has to do with some punitive damages over the course of for centuries of abuse. I'm sorry. I don't have this thought, this kind of when people make this argument of reparations to me, it sounds right to me. It sounds fair to me. I would say that regardless of the country, if I was looking at another country that was doing something similar, at the point where there is some kind of response between Israel and Palestine, would I believe that Israel should pay reparations to the pain of Palestinians? Yes, I do. This is not specific to the United States. It's not because I'm African American. It's not because part of me is Native American. It has everything to do with what seems to be just right. So, it's like I partially agree with you, Garden, but I partially don't. This has more to do with just leveling these things off. The government has to explain in public, Jamal. People will understand once they have facts. No, they will not. The cool man. No, they will not. No. I mean, if I'm not white, of course, so fair enough. But I have had conversations with this issue with whites, not on reparations specifically, but on issues of race and issues of conversation. And if I'm being honest, even the argument the Garden is making to some degree kind of makes my point. This idea of paying back for crimes that were committed, even if the government makes the argument, a lot of people are not going to look at this as the U.S. government committed crimes. They're going to look at this as, why do we have to give them anything? They're not slaves. They don't know anybody that were slaves. So how are they, or why should they, get anything for crimes that were committed in the past? Missing the point that when you look at the statistics from the standpoint of poverty, you can see it. It's still there. Just because these people weren't necessarily born as slaves, it doesn't necessarily mean that their living conditions wasn't materially harmed by what took place in the past. That argument still is not going to fly, though. That argument is not going to fly. That argument, what I just said, is absolutely right. And when we take people and prosecute people, oftentimes there's a punitive aspect of the prosecution. At no point does the judge say, yeah, you killed all of these people, you tortured all of these people, in some cases you raped these people, but hey, it's been a few years, so we're just going to let that pass. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. My position is nuanced. I think it's morally right to give reparations. I don't know what reparations means, but I think it's morally right to do so. Politically, I think it's impossible. Politically, I don't think it works. Politically, I don't think it works. For example, even on issues of affirmative action. Like affirmative action was supposed to be some leveling off. This a play at reparations. This idea of, look, we're going to make sure that we can integrate people into society. You can't, we're going to hire a certain number of people. They were doing this to try to balance off the scales for things that took place in the past. But even that, at that point, it wasn't slaves that were used. It was, white women, people from other countries. There were some African Americans that got jobs and stuff because of it, but it was viciously attacked by Republicans. And whites looked at the argument and said, okay, fair enough. The argument is somewhat right. I don't want to have to do it. This is a self-interested argument, but the argument works nonetheless, whether or not the argument is right or wrong. It's, Why do those guys get that job? Especially if people, or there's some kind of economic stress in the society itself. Right now, they use immigrants for that front. Oh, those immigrants are taking your jobs. Those immigrants are taking your jobs. But the same argument was made for affirmative action. Oh, that unqualified African American got the job because she's black. I just don't know how that stuff is going to play politically. And I got to be honest, from all of the candidates, Sanders' campaign, what he's putting out from the standpoint of a class-based argument is going to benefit the people at the bottom end of the economic spectrum in spades. Whether he's calling for reparations or not is almost irrelevant to that particular point. None of the candidates knows what that means per se. And in not knowing what that means, I go to the things that I do know what it means. A policy that is going to benefit all is going to be far easier to pursue than a policy that is specific to one racial group. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't think the racial group thing flies. I do think making sure that eradication of poverty as a whole is going to disproportionately benefit the people at the bottom, in which case, whether Bernie Sanders says reparations or not is almost irrelevant. His plan is the best for African Americans, let me tell it. Taj Marie, elites benefited the most from slavery, yes. Thus, it would only make sense to implement a tax schedule to reflect the fact that most wealth is inherited versus created. Yes, that's true. The UBI and then reparations. God, I love my audience. She's right. Most of the wealth, I mentioned earlier that wealth, creates wealth. Like you could set a bunch of money in the bank and that money would just magically just grow. Just bam, bam, bam. The more you have, the more you get. So you get into this interesting scenario where people started off with zero and had to, try to work for any and everything that they had, whereas others in the society weren't barred out of jobs and weren't stopped from certain progress. Much of the wealth is passed from person to person. Like this idea of it's not necessarily that the wealth is gained. It's a lot of it is wealth that has been inherited and just passed on. It's part of the reason why Republicans go after and vilify the wealth tax so much. They want to get rid of it because they want their backers to be able to essentially accrue all of that and just continuously pass it over and over and over again to their kids. Eventually, at some point, you're going to have the first trillionaire. So that's true. So this idea of a wealth tax. And then universal basic income. Yes, again, people who are disproportionately at the bottom of the income economic scale will benefit magnificently from it. Whether you call it reparations or not is almost irrelevant to the process. They will benefit magnificently, African Americans. I'm making the point to you that whether Bernie Sanders is white, whether he's older, whether he's quote unquote Jewish, whether he's whatever the identity stuff that you want to categorize him as, him saying or not saying reparations is not the same thing as him not doing things that are going to benefit the people at the bottom end of the economic spectrum in spades. It doesn't have to be reparations per se if your goal is trying to eradicate poverty as a whole. And I got to be honest, it is difficult, if not impossible, to make a class or a race-based argument in American politics. It's the reason why they stay away from it like the plague. Elizabeth Warren is only going there because Elizabeth Warren is desperate in order to get something going from the standpoint of her campaign, and she's trying to bring some energy in, and she believes reparations is the way to do it. Sanders is smart enough to know that his chances of winning the election are actually pretty good. And in being pretty good, he also has to be able to make it through a general election, and he will be vilified and attacked mercilessly. Simultaneously, though, the use of reparations goes into this narrative that Bernie Sanders only gets white people, in which case Bernie Sanders is not for reparations. By the same token, this is a political landmine that if he accepts reparations, that he will lose the general election because he will be attacked before. The reparations thing is a political bomb. That's my point. Bomb. Jamarl, we need a Green New Deal with federal jobs guarantee, national improved and expanded Medicare for all, basic income for those who can't work. Giovanni Levana. Yes, agree. And again, I make the point that whether you call it reparations or not, this magnificently benefits the people at the bottom. I guess this is kind of what I say. I agree and disagree with Gardner. I agree with him from a standpoint of, it has to be getting rid of poverty. Like your objective needs to be to get rid of poverty. Whatever word you use for it, that needs to be the objective. To say I'm going to get rid of black poverty in and of itself is a noble pursuit, but how do you do that, and what does that mean? And can you get rid of black poverty? Why can't you just get rid of poverty as a whole? From an objective standpoint, yes, I agree. Get rid of poverty as a whole. The public will be on your side when you try to get rid of it as a whole. They will not understand if you try to get rid of it based on we're going to do something about black poverty. I just don't. I don't see that working. By the same token, there's a perspective here that goes beyond just what takes place in objective reality, but goes into almost a moral argument of trying to balance out an incomprehensible wrong. African Americans who make this argument for reparations are not wrong. I even agree with them on this. My issue here is the politics of it. Politics. Google Selesmienfo. Blacks get thrown into the minorities and benefit trickle down. We still remain on the bottom of the economic ladder. That's why ADOS won't go for this. I know what you're talking about, the African descendants of slaves. Fair enough. And I even get this argument that, blacks' interests are always cast to the side, or that they're part of a Democratic Party that takes them for granted. All that stuff is true. Agreed. My argument has even been, I've even made that argument. The Democratic Party, if you're going to give them much support, then for the most part, they don't need to say about your interests. That you're going to say Republicans are maniacs. You don't want those creature dwellers to get in office. What are they going to do to you, et cetera, et cetera. They can use the Republican boogeyman to keep certain interests in line, even though they're not necessarily going to do anything for those interests. Agreed. But the American descendants of slaves has a problem. And it's a political problem. African Americans make up 13% of the population. In making up 13% of the population, you have another part of the population that benefited just by virtue of their skin tone, but don't necessarily see themselves as being materially responsible for what has taken place. The notion of African American poverty being a vestige of the inception of this country, again, doesn't fly for them because their argument is somewhat, it's self-interest. Well, look, I don't want to have to be responsible for that. I don't want that stain on me. I didn't have anything to do with that. Missing the point that the poverty that is plagued the African American community is a direct result of the founding and the perpetuation of white image of African Americans, and a legal structure in order to back up that expropriation of wealth from slavery. For centuries, like it's hard to get that across. Like what does it mean for a century? What does it mean to live in a century like that for centuries, where you're using the wealth of somebody else, and then at the end of this, just said, okay, we're done, and then you get far enough along where the descendants turn around and say, we had nothing to do with that, kick rocks, and you should be over that by now. So it's not that I think the ADOS is wrong. ADOS issue here, though, is that they need to explain, how do you get that over the finish line? Like, how do you get that over the finish line? And will the material results of somebody like Sanders, or a plan like Sanders, be better for the bottom section of the society than to not get anything over the finish line at all? And I'm not saying better in this kind of incremental sense. I'm saying dramatically better. ADOS may not necessarily go for this, fair enough, and I understand that organizations have to some degree, have a hard line in regards to how they push for policies, because that hard line tries to pull the person to your particular camp. But I don't say things are impossible often. And granted, this gives you my perspective of the country itself, like what I think people are going to go for in the country itself. But I don't know how you'd make that work. A, I don't know what it means. B, it's a loaded word. It's like saying UFOs. So people have a particular image of it, even though they don't know what it means. And then it becomes, how do you make that work where you won't be vilified mercilessly for it? As opposed to the secondary option of not use the word, but deliver the results. Come on. And I don't think I'm wrong on this. I know I'm sounding like Garno now, but I don't think I'm wrong. Let's see. I think both perspectives are legit. I guess that's all. I know it sounds like I'm saying two different things, but I'm not. It's just nuanced. I predict the Democrats losing in 2020. Republicans must love the divisiveness this reparations will cause the Democratic Party. Whites will flock to Republican Party. Yes, I think so too. That's it. I think so too. I mean, I understand. Again, I completely understand why Elizabeth Warren would do it. You're in a primary. That primary is decidedly to the left of the Democratic Party. And it has been showing that Hillary Clinton lost that election, that a small perturbation in the number of people who come out to vote for you can have disastrous consequences from the standpoint of losing the election. They know it. The loss of Hillary Clinton proves it. So what do? They pander to the elements of the party that they believe they were going to need in order to win. In Elizabeth Warren's case, Elizabeth Warren doesn't have much traction at this point. Even though she's considered to be a beast on Wall Street, she doesn't have much traction. You have people who don't particularly like her and don't forgive her for not backing Sanders. So there's that. But then, it's like, so her thing is, I need to get support. How does she do it? Reparations. She throws out the nuclear option. This idea being, politically, I think I said it before, Sanders gets cast as the white candidate, which is nonsense. And they treat him as if he can't get minorities, which again is nonsense when you look at the polling on this. And so one of the attacks that you can use from a political standpoint without necessarily attacking him on this, meaning you attack him just by virtue of the policy that you're saying that you're trying to accomplish, is reparations. Now, I strongly suspect when Elizabeth Warren is going to be asked about this on a campaign trail, let's say she gets to the general, it's going to be the name reparations, while what she's going to be talking about is going to be a little more diffuse and may not go specifically to the descendants of slaves. So I understand why Elizabeth Warren is doing this, but yeah, this is going to be a political fight on the left. Now, that said, if Sanders wins that political fight, and Sanders at no point has ever said, yes, I'm on board for reparations, what he's on board for, reparations or not, is almost irrelevant. Getting rid of poverty gets rid of poverty. And if you have a group that's in poverty, then his plan affects that group positively, whether he uses the term or not. I'm saying the term is loaded. Yes, from a moral standpoint, I think it's owed. No, from a political standpoint, I don't think you can get it through. So, I'm nuanced on it, but I'm clear on how I feel about it. ADS already has an agenda. We want a committee formed at least to discuss it. No discussion, no vote. Google says. Okay. The term is loaded. That's all I'm saying. It's like UFO. The reason why they changed the name to UAPS was because UFO is a loaded term. If I say reparations, and you can have 20 people in a room, and each person will think what you just said is something fundamentally different than the other person. None of them would know what it means. All of them will have certain ideas of it, and none of those ideas would be quite in alignment with the other person. And even with the ideas associated with it, you would have varying degrees of what people believe is fair or not fair, because they don't see themselves as materially responsible for the things that took place for African Americans. There needs to be some level of guilt associated with pulling that off. You may have some elements of the Democratic Party that may be okay with it, but it is a hard thing to push off. And I'll even go one further. Cory Booker or Kamala Harris would have a harder time making that case because they're black. Yes, I've said that. Obama would have a hard time making the case, again, because he's African American in the political space. They are all aware of this. When they're asked, why are you guys get iffy about talking about reparations? Because they can't say the honest truth. The honest truth is whites don't regard their history honestly. Because if you did, you would understand that you started this country off with a genocide and followed it up with slavery in this kind of racist, instantialized racist state. That's just honest. Is there a consequence for that? Yes or no? This idea of just moving on just seems very, it's like very self-interested to me. Very self-interested to me. It's not self-interest. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's self-serving. Extraordinarily self-serving. But whether or not it's self-serving or not is somewhat secondary to whether or not you can get enough of them on your side that says okay with that. And even if you did get them on your side to say, oh, there's okay with that, what about whites that are poor? How are they going to respond to the fact that you're doing a program specifically for African Americans? Whether it's fair or not is irrelevant. I hope you understand what I'm saying on this. I'm not double talking. What's fair is irrelevant to how people feel. People have their own incentives and interests. ADOS, I understand ADOS, fine. That's perfectly okay for them to have that particular perspective in which they're trying to push. Understood. All groups have somewhat of an uncompromising agenda when they're trying to advocate for something. It's just the nature of the beast. But you have to ask, what is their goal? If their goal is to make life materially better for the people of the country that were slighted through the founding and the propagation of this country, is that best served by accomplishing nothing, or is that best served by somebody who's attentive to those aims, even if they don't use the name? Just saying. Just saying. Oh, Jamarl, you're sketchy. Sketchy about what? We have 200 viewers. Please donate $5 a month to Jamarl. Oh, thank you, Clyde. Jamarl can eat. Jamarl is starving down to skin and bones, and you can say, I am not. Lisa Carla, Jamarl is sketchy as fuck when it comes to the topic of hard things for black folks. What do you mean I'm sketchy as fuck? What do you mean I'm sketchy as fuck? It's a political channel. Giovanni Lavana, Jamarl, today is the 4th anniversary of the passing of Leonard Nimoy. No way. Live long and prosper. Oh, God. I'm sketchy as fuck when it comes to issues of blacks. That's hard. I don't think I'm sketchy as fuck. I don't even know what that quite means. I think I know what that means. I have a perspective, all of us do, on what we think the world is. It's not something that we actively, engage in per se, but when items, topics, ideas, when those things come up, we have this perspective in our heads of the world. It's the same thing you have of your mom, of your dad, of all these people in your life. It's, your perspective of those people is not indicative of what those things are per se. It may be close or not close, but it's your perspective of it. Like the person who's standing beside you is not really your mom, it's your perspective of your mom. Your mom is something else. She's an entity unto herself. Your mom has a perspective of herself. You have a perspective of your mom. Your mom could be in different things depending on who she's talking to. All of them will have a different impression of who your mom is. I'm saying we do this for the world also, when we look at the world. At a smaller subset than the world, I look at American society. And I ask the question of myself, what do I believe can be accomplished within the context of American society? And I ask myself that question even further so with the context of race. I look at these things mostly as issues of class, because I think most of these things are issues of class. Even issues of race, to some degree, boils down to issues of class, or at least they started off in their exceptions as issues of class. They became something, an issue to themselves. It's not that I'm sketchy as fuck when it comes to issues that affect African Americans. It's that I'm sketchy as fuck as what whites perceive on this stuff, if that makes sense. Because what you're asking me is, what do I believe is accomplished or can be accomplished on this issue? And my regard for this and my perspective of this is coming from, what do I think of white America and how do I think they perceive African Americans? It's not that I'm sketchy as fuck on this issue. You had me at hello on this issue. I've just made the argument, the moral argument for reparations early on. I even made the argument for why, from an objective standpoint, it would be beneficial. I've done both of those things, even in this one. This video has gone long, but even in this video, I've done both of those things. But in a third way, I just make this secondary argument of, is it politically feasible? That's all. And not just, is it politically feasible, do you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish without using the term? How am I sketchy as fuck when I am, agreeing with you, but I'm making just the political case of, it is nearly impossible, at least in my case, of getting whites on board for that. That's all. While at the same token, agreeing that it is morally right. How is it sketchy as fuck? I'm being honest with you. How How's that sketchy as fuck? I don't know how this sketchy as fuck. Rashad Dixon, you're my favorite liberal. Too bad I'm too far to the left. Oh, you believe you're out-lefting me. Fair enough. I'm just being honest. Jamarl isn't sketchy as being. I'm being honest. Like, the argument that you need to make to me to make this work. Just so I'm making my position clear on this. A, yes, reparations is morally right. There is no judge that looks at somebody who's committed murder, rape, meaning, and say, okay, I'm just going to give you a pass because this stuff happened in the past. No, there are punitive measures, and not just punitive measures to try to balance the scales and to try to heal a wound that took place in the past. From a moral standpoint, I think it's right to try to repair that. This kind of reparations, this 40 acres and a mule for our current scenario of people who were descendants of slaves. That's the first point. From a moral standpoint, I think it's right. Secondly, from a balancing the scale standpoint, I think it's right. The arguments that whites make of, well, I wasn't around, so I didn't have anything to do with it, and none of these people knew any slaves, doesn't necessarily apply. The crime was committed by the government of the United States, not the individuals. Even though individuals did horrendous things, the crime was committed by the government of the United States. That crime was committed on people who were of African descent and brought into this country in order to force to work. That's after the genocide that was committed for the Native Americans. This went on for centuries. Rape, abuse, killings, the destruction of human being into something, this mangled human being. That goes on for centuries. And even at the point where it's ended, nothing is given. People are still almost relegated to these slaves in name only because of the codes, the black codes that existed. And even when you get further beyond that point, African Americans kept out of certain jobs, kept out of certain positions, kept out of certain living areas. You listen to James Baldwin. James Baldwin is talking about the influence of Malcolm X and why that influence was so prevalent. That stuff carried on. Like it wasn't like history just, went out into nowhere. No, there are vestiges of history that continue to bleed into where we are currently. And you can look at the wealth disparity between African Americans and whites, and you can see it. It's visible today, 2019. Very visible today in 2019. So the vestiges are still there. Whether or not the individuals were there or not is somewhat irrelevant to the process. The crime was committed by the U.S. government. So in trying to balance the scales to some degree, even on that, I think it's somewhat right. But the problem is not necessarily one of morality, or the problem is not even one of somewhat balancing the scales. The problem has to do with how people are going to respond to the balancing of the scales when those people in the country don't even believe that the scale should be balanced. Just saying. That's where I'm at. So, if you're going to attack me, understand my point. The argument that needs to be made is whether or not you can politically get it over the finish line. I understand when I talk about Medicare for all and all those things. I say that because those things are tips of the spear. Those things are things that are easily defensible and things that you can kind of push your way through in order to get some kind of political objective. Reparations is divisive because a large part of the population doesn't even believe that it's necessary or should take place. That's where we're at. So the politics has to be, how do you get something that's divisive over the finish line? And two, what are the objectives of the divisive thing that you're trying to get over the finish line? If you can get that over the finish line, if you can get an outcome that's favorable to the people who would have been benefited from the reparations, why wouldn't you get that outcome? Especially if you can get that without the divisiveness of calling it reparations. I'm making this very specific point that what Sanders is pushing for is going to go disproportionately to the bottom just because that's the part that needs it the most. Some of those will be white, yes. Some of those will be women, yes. Some of those will be Hispanic, yes. But some of those will also be African Americans that will benefit magnificently from being able to go to school without a cost, from being able to get health care without a cost. You're talking about a public benefit to the society itself that lifts the entire bottom, not just African Americans. Would I take that as a compromise as opposed to somebody saying reparations, even though I agree with reparations? Yes, because materially the people at the bottom are benefited by it. I guess that's what I'm saying. This is not incremental. This is a significant benefit to the people at the bottom of the income economic scale. Yes, I would be insane not to take that, even if it's not called reparations, and even if I think reparations are morally right. I don't think that's sketchy. I would like the argument to be made of how you get that across the finish line. That's all. Just saying. Jamarl, don't take these chats for more than what they are. Half commits are made mental. They shoot it without any thought. I'm not taking it to heart. And maybe I'm regarding it this way because, being African American, there is a tendency of a black card, even though I try to say I look at this stuff from sitting on the moon. If I was an African American, I was sitting in another country, I would like to think that I would say the exact same thing, that those things are morally right, and then make the case of what is the politics surrounding it. I think I do that with any issue and every issue. What are the politics surrounding it versus what is the reality of it? Politics and reality often diverge. So in this case, this is kind of the point that I'm making. I guess I look at that comment, and that comment can be made by all sorts of people in having this conversation. And I don't think I'm being out-lefted. I don't know what the feeling is. I think the feeling is associated with, I think reparations is, God, this sounds weird, and I'm saying this poorly, but I'm just going to say it. I think the strongest position from an African American context is reparations, right? I mean, if you're looking for the argument of saying African American issues are always put to the side, I suspect they're always put to the side because 90% vote Democrat and they can use the Republican Party to scare shit out of you. The only way to get your issues attended to and listened to is being willing to leave, which means the potential of a Republican winning. By the same token, if you're trying to get a device or some kind of party that looks out and represents your interests and not in a bullshit, just rhetoric way, then yeah, the potential for them to lose and for them to lose your support is the way to do it. That's the first point. I think it's the pro-black or strongly black position from an African American context that reparations are right. And I agree with this position. But my agreement is, like I said, nuanced. My agreement is a little bit nuanced. Anthony Reyes, Lisa Collette, the Green New Deal and Federal Jobs Guarantee and UBI could lift everyone up. Yes, and we can talk about these other aspects of debt owed to American descendants of slaves. See, the problem with that conversation is that's the way Democrats talked about Sanders and talked about third-party stuff. It's like, oh, no, we can't talk about the third party this election. We have to talk about that stuff after Hillary gets elected. So, fair enough, Anthony Reyes. Here's a question. If Sanders gets elected, and let's say, for whatever reason, you have a population that's motivated and push so much pressure on the political space that federal jobs guarantee gets passed, even a declaration by the U.S. government that healthcare and a job are human rights. If we're talking about life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness, you can't necessarily have those things in a capitalistic system without some level of economic resilience, right? So I think it's natural as natural could be to say, look, if the private sector can't find the job for you to do, we, the federal government, will make sure you have a job. This is better for the economy as a whole because this is money that's going for taxpayers, and that money is going into other people's pockets who's going to use that money to buy other things and to buy other things and the tax revenue from it and everything else. It's a better option than that person just not working or that person working in some kind of black market deal. If after all of that, what does reparations look like in a context where wealth, in an economic sense, where African Americans have been lifted out of poverty, where poverty itself has been somewhat eliminated in the society? What does reparations look like? We always think of reparations in a financial sense, that, this has to be given back in some kind of monetary thing or some way to kind of balance the scales. But the programs that they've always had, like, affirmative action, didn't go specifically to American descendants of slaves. They were used by all sorts of people. So is it really reparations if it doesn't go to the very specific people who deserve the reparations? But what does it look like when the economics of it, aren't as pressing as they are now? Do you give the American descendants of slaves a check? If so, how much of that check? Is it the today's equivalent of 40 acres and a mule? How do you determine who's going to be the American descendants of slaves? Like, all of these things become fascinating questions in order to answer. But I'm curious to know, what does it mean when the poverty element of this has been alleviated? I don't know what it means when the poverty element hasn't been alleviated, let alone when it has. Let's see. Lisa Collette. Your fans will always aid you. Not all the time. My fans attack me all the time. Let something else into the bubble. I watch you all the time and trust most of what you said, but in this, you're sketchy as fuck. Then you have to explain to me, how do you get it past? And what of it do you disagree? Meaning, what have I said that you fundamentally disagree with, Lisa? That's the question that needs to be asked. Let's see, Lisa Collette. It wouldn't even piss me off you weren't influencing so many folks who want the easy answer. You believe that... Lisa, you have to explain to me, what is it that you disagree with? Lisa, you have to explain to me, what is it you disagree with? Sketchy as fuck, it's not really an argument. Yeah, I don't even know what you're disagreeing with. Lisa, basic question, what are you disagreeing with? Lisa is mad as fuck. She may be mad, but again, I am asking, what does she disagree with what I said, and she has not answered that question. AOC is my girlfriend. We disagree on many topics. AOC is your girlfriend? All the people on earth are in one family. I agree, kind of. Accrued the immortal, we paid with the blood of our Northmen, Jamal. Yes. John Hill, you're wrong on this, JT. Lisa, what am I wrong about? You haven't even... Okay, yeah. Jamal seems like a nice guy, but he's misinformed. Again, you guys need to explain what I am wrong about. And just saying I am wrong is not necessarily an argument. Do you not see the... Lisa, I'm asking you a basic question. The website is not an answer. What have I said that you disagree with? And explain why you disagree with it. That's all. I'm asking you something very basic and straightforward. Yeah, all right, I'll let Lisa call in. Fair enough. Lisa, you're more than welcome to call into the show to make your point. Explain to me why I'm wrong on this issue. Let's see. I gotta be honest, I don't remember my call-in number. Damn it, that's not right. Let's see, where is it? Come on. Where is my... Damn it, they changed their... Here we go. All right. Rock Lee, what type of reparations for DD or ADOS would you propose if Marilyn Williams was the Democratic nominee or Nina Turner got Bernie to support them? Never come out. I have no idea. I mean, yeah, I have no idea. Lisa, here's the number. And I saw John Hill wanted to call in. What did Anthony Reyes say? Dark Rose Lefty, thanks for your asshole comment. 188 progressive voice. I never heard it called that. Just had it quoted at me. So Lisa, call in. There's a number. Yeah, Clyde, there it is. Call in. Make your point. I want to hear what you got to say. First, I want you to explain what you disagree with me about. Because I don't think what I said was wrong. But if I am wrong, fair enough. Make me know it. Is Lisa going to call in? Inquisitive minds want to know. Come on, Lisa. Yeah, that's a call in. We can call in. I want him to call in. I want him to make their case. No, I want her to make her case. Look, this is not a I used to do call-ins all the time, but I stopped doing call-ins because the same people will call. I was like, what is the point of a call-in if the same people call? What the hell is that? Why is it doing that? Hello, what's your name and who am I? Well, I was about to say who am I talking to and what's your name, but both of those things are the same. What's happening?
This is John Hill. Your phone is kind of like breaking up.
Let's see. Hold on. Let's see what's going on. It sounds weird to me, and I'm not sure why it sounds this way. The speakers are right, and this. Can you hear me? Okay, though.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, go for it. So, what's up, John Hill? You were one of the people that disagree with me. You and Lisa aggressively disagree with me on this. What is the disagreement? First, you understand my position on this. My position is nuanced. So, what about this issue that you disagree with me with from the standpoint of my perspective?
Because you're conflating a class issue with something that is owed. Those are two different subjects. And this is why I was telling you for weeks that I understand that you love sheepdog Bernie, that you stand for him, but this is his Achilles heel. I think this is the Achilles heel for all these Democratic candidates, because I've seen this rhetoric start to grow. It's been growing for the last couple of years, and it kind of boiled over. You kind of missed the story. I was trying to warn you about this beforehand so that you would understand the nuance of what people are saying, what the whole ADOS movement is about. I think you don't understand the movement, and that's why you're looking at it from a perspective of fairness. And this is not about being fair. This is about something that's owed and something that is owed from the government. It has nothing to do with. It has to do with listing ADOS out of poverty, but it doesn't deal with. It's not a classist argument. So basically, where you're complaining at.
But I made the point earlier today that I look at this from various perspectives. Like, in one perspective, I agree with the reparations thing. I think I said that on more than one occasion. That from a moral standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world of trying to balance the scales. And even from the standpoint of owed and fairness are somewhat twin coins, right? One is on the side of the other. If something is owed, it's only fair that owed or that debt is paid. Fairness is kind of just built into this idea of owing something. I don't disagree with the politics of this. Even if I look at this as a class-based thing, I look at it as there's a moral argument to be made that a crime was committed when the United States government was formed and the way that the government propagated itself. And that crime should be balanced. That's my perspective of this. So it's not that I disagree with the reparations thing. My issue boils down to the politics of it. You understand that, right?
I understand that, but it's still, I think where, the other person is angry at is like, and this is the issue that is going to, a lot of these candidates are going to run into, because I saw Kamala Harris trying to turn this into what she's trying to have like a tax cut or a tax incentive
Yeah,
for
she's doing tax
families.
credits. She's doing
Yeah,
tax credits.
they're trying to turn this debt into a free check for everyone.
Yes, she
And
is.
that is the issue. It's not a free check. Like you can't conflate the class perspective with reparations. If you do that, you're missing the point. You're going to piss off, people like, I guess, I don't know what her name is, Lisa or something,
Yeah,
whatever.
listen.
Simply because it's like you're not understanding what is owed. You're not understanding the issue. And I understand. Let me just finish. I understand it's not popular. It's never going to be popular. But it's not about popularity. It's about what's owed. This country has done so much harm to the American DOS community for over 400 years, and it's like, it's not about fairness. It's not about.
But it is fairness. I mean, it's
fair, but it's not fairness for everyone.
No, that part I agree with
saying.
you. This is, I guess, my issue with this, or my slight annoyance with this, is that I agree with all of that. Like the argument of this is not purely a class-based argument. Fair enough. I said it myself. It goes beyond the class-based thing into almost like a moral right. Like, you've committed a crime, there needs to be some kind of balancing of the scales on the crime. I even agree with that. If you want to say the 40 acres and a mule, and what does that equal in current day value after everything that's been associated with it, fair enough. My issue is not with reparations. And I keep saying that, and for whatever reason, that keeps getting ignored.
Because you're I think you're tying, like I said, you're tying in the class issue and what is,
It is a class issue to some degree. Like, you're acting as if those things are inextricably linked. Are unlinked from one another. This issues of class and this issue of what's right are linked. The class-based argument, where African Americans, the disparity between whites and blacks, are a direct result of what took place from the standpoint of slavery and what took place after that. Would you agree with that?
Two, it's more complicated than that, because you're talking about, when I think of class, it's how you perceive it. When you talk about class issues, it's not about color. This subject is about color. And like I said, the problem I continuously see, and I don't even think they're doing it, people are not trying to do it, like, I think they're doing it on purpose, honestly, because they're trying to spin this to a freebie, like giving everybody some type of class policy.
Oh no, I feel you on that. When you shouldn't use the term unless you mean it. When you explain what you're explaining, I understand. I hear everything you're saying. My thing is, it kind of sounds like you're going in that direction. No, I have multiple perspectives on it. It's just that it's not a singular issue. Like, the argument that you just made here was the argument I made going after Garnome's position. I even said as much. I even said that, this is taken in different ways. There's an argument to be said that there's a moral debt owed. And maybe that's not enough for you, but I kind of made this point that from the standpoint of African Americans, this being felt like all of the priorities of African Americans get put to the wayside. And this very specific thing, making decisions. Like, let me say it this way: the reason
it's more than it. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's more than just American DOS issues are put to the wayside. It's more of the system is built off of off of them failing, off of us failing.
Exploitation of labor.
It's not just slave labor. It's what's going on now. It's going on, with Redline. There's multiple issues. I mean, I can make the argument that the whole system is systemically racist, and I mean, there's data to prove it, and that's what's being addressed. like I said, it's when you explain it, and I understand you know you're trying to have a more nuanced approach and look at it from different angles.
Well, it is different angles.
But
I mean, because there's no. It's like
it's
what is the
really
perspective
not.
of?
It's a dead.
There is no such thing as one singular point of view. There's just not. I mean, come on. Like, and there are multiple points of view that could be just as accurate, as opposed to just a singular point of view. That's this idea that there's only one point of view. There's no way.
When I say there is not a multiple point of view, what I'm saying is there's a debt that is owed.
Yes.
But that's it.
But where did I disagree with that?
When you're disagreeing, when I'm saying is you're saying there's more issues to the subject matter, and I'm just saying there's a debt that's owed, and that's it. Where the nuance and where the issue comes in is, like you said, it's like what would be paid. I've seen estimates of like 14 trillion.
Yeah.
Like it's going to completely change the system that we currently have.
I understand. I guess my issue here is I don't know where I'm disagreeing with you. Like people are telling me that I'm quote unquote sketchy as fuck, and I've agreed with the premise that from a race standpoint that a horrible crime was committed, and there needs to be a balance to that. But I added to the point of saying not only was a crime committed, but there are consequences to that today that fall within the economic arena based on what took place then. And the question becomes, how do you balance the scales on this? And is it politically feasible to try to get those scales balanced by being specific to the context of race? Or do you get more bang for your buck when you're trying to get a policy that brings up most or all?
And that's where you're going to get the pushback. Right there. You can push back,
but I'm perfectly right in this. Like, I'm not, I guess my point is, I'm not wrong in this.
What?
I agree with the original premise that reparations are owed. I agree with the premise that, not just owed from a standpoint of trying to get some level of social cohesion and trying to mend the gap. I even agree with that point. It's my only issue with the reparations conversation is A, what does it mean? And B, beyond what does it mean, how do you make it work? How do you get it over the finish line in a political way, in a way that that doesn't lose for you in the general election? That's all.
Okay. For your first point, how do you ask? What does it look like?
Yeah.
There's a bill. I think it's HR 40 that needs to be it's being pushed now. That is dealing with doing research on what details would be what would be the plan to if there was a payback of this debt. What would be the details? It would be for the research of the reparations.
You mean essentially what does it look like? That somebody's put forth a plan of reparations.
Like who would get paid? What's the amount? It's not just about giving somebody a check. It might be forms of educational benefits or housing benefits, or there's multitude of ways of just giving somebody like $400,000 and they're saying everything is done and this issue is complete. And I think a lot of people that talk about this subject, I think that's where they're getting they're focusing on what would be paid, how does it look, when honestly those are things that need to be furtherly looked at and furtherly researched.
But the reason why people are saying how does it look is because to some degree they agree with you on the premise, right?
I understand that, but even though they agree with the premise, I think people are just, by asking what do it look like, it kind of shows that you're not understanding where this whole push came from. Because like I said, this rhetoric has really just sprung back up in the last few years.
I know, but it's almost like it's not enough to agree with the premise. You have to agree exactly how we see it. Come on.
I don't think it's not about agreeing exactly. It's about understanding before you're asking the questions of how does it look. Because these are the type of conversations that are being had. Like, okay, that's something that has to be further researched. If you really study what the movement is, if you study what these individuals are talking
Are
about,
you telling me
then you
that
understand.
asking the question of what does reparations look like is
I'm not.
somehow a wrong question?
Don't. No, I'm not saying it's a wrong question. What I'm saying is, it's not at that point. You're, to me, like I said, I've been watching this whole movement build for the last 2 years. When you ask about what would reparations look like, when the people that are starting the movement that started this whole rhetoric and started this this movement are saying that the first step is to research what reparations look like. It shows that you're ill-informed.
Okay, so asking what reparations look like is somehow a bad question, and the reason that it's somehow a bad question, showing that the person is uninformed, because ultimately the truth of it is they don't know what it looks like. I mean, what you're essentially saying is it needs to be researched, which means they don't know what it looks like. So asking the question of what does it look like show you're uninformed because they don't know what it looks like.
Exactly.
That sounds nonsensical. You really come on. Come on, John. Come on.
The thing that you're getting caught up on is you're getting caught up in the details.
Yeah, because the details are the thing that matters.
You're getting caught up in the wrong details.
No, I'm not. No, there's no such thing as wrong details. In this particular case, the catch here is people already agree with your premise. And it's like you guys are trying to find some other thing to point at because people agree with your premise. And when they agree with your premise, they don't fight because they're not fighting on whether or not you're legit or not. Like, meaning whether the premise is legit. They're asking, okay, what does this look like? And you guys are taking issue with the fact. And you're taking issue with the fact that I'm asking what it looks like because that's a sore spot because you don't know. That's the reality of it.
I gave you the answer. The answer is HR 40. It's the sponsor HR party to do the research.
Okay, so reparations.
But I just explained that to you, and you're still asking, what does it look like?
Well, because
and that's what I'm saying.
Because you didn't explain anything.
You're misinformed.
You didn't explain anything. Your explanation was it needs to be researched.
That's the answer.
But
you asked the question. You
understand that if you're, and I'm going to end this because I'm not going to keep going back and forth, but I think people understand your point. But ultimately, what you've just said was that asking what does reparations look like is a bad question and shows people are ill-informed.
I never said it was a bad question.
You said people are ill-informed for asking the question.
Yeah, you sound misinformed. Because if you understood what the ADOS movement is about, if you understand what people are talking about when they're talking about reparations, the first step is to research it.
Yes, the first step is to research.
You keep asking the same question over again, and I keep saying,
but what are they researching?
And I'm not saying it.
But what are they researching? They're researching what is reparations ultimately going to look like, right?
Exactly.
So I'm ill-informed for asking a question that they're asking themselves.
I'm saying
that makes no sense. I'm sorry. That makes no sense. You have the agreement of a large section of the left. Agree, reparations. And the very fact of me bringing that up and asking what does it look like is a sore spot because they don't know. And that's not necessarily bad. It's just that they don't know.
Listen, you can ask that a million times, but I'm going to tell you, as of now, it needs to be researched.
Yes, I agree.
So they keep asking that. Like, I watch your videos. I don't watch all your videos.
John, hold on, wait.
I watch it when
John. Listen to what I'm saying.
I'm listening to everything you're saying.
I don't think you are. You already have people's agreement on the idea of reparations. When people ask the question that apparently that the people themselves are researching is what they look like, that's not bad, wrong, or ill-informed, especially since the people who are looking into it are looking into it. It's an open question. Asking the details of what reparations is going to be the determining factor of whether or not it's going to be implemented. Like, it's not, you're saying people are ill-informed for asking what does it look like when the people who themselves are involved are asking what it looks like.
You're missing. If you ask me a question, if you ask me what time it is, and it's 10 o'clock, and I tell you it's 10 o'clock, and you keep asking the same question, like, what are you not understanding?
But that's not the analogy. The analogy would be, I say, what time is it? And you say, we're researching to figure out what time it is.
I gave you the answer. I said they're researching the answer.
No, that's my point. It's if I said what time it is, you're not telling me it's 10 o'clock. You're telling me, well, we're researching to figure out what time it is. I'm still left without an answer.
Then how can I tell you the time?
But I'm left without an answer. That's my point. It's not a bad thing. I have to be honest. I don't even see why you're
You
feeling
keep,
so crap way
you
about
keep saying it's bad. Like I think you're taking it. You're taking it personal. I'm not coming
No,
at
John.
you.
No.
I'm just trying to.
I'm not taking it. I'm not taking it
listening.
anyway. I guess I'm just trying to make it
Can you
very
listen to me?
plain.
Can you listen to me now? Because I listen to you. I can use this to talk. This is your show. I understand that. But all I'm just
I'll leave you with the last word. So go for it.
All I'm just trying to tell you, and I've seen this a lot. It's a kind of like a spin into a class argument, and that's where you're getting the pushback, and that's why people are going to look at you side eye. And
They can look at me any way they
Bernie
want.
did it.
I don't care.
Huh?
I said they can look at me any way they want. It's what I care about is
Exactly.
whether I'm right or wrong, and if I'm okay with defending the position that I've taken. And it's not that I'm spinning it into a class argument. To some degree, it is a class argument, even though there's an aspect of this that's also race. The catch is, it's not one or the other. The problem is, it's both, and you're only looking at it from one aspect.
The spin is you're turning it into a class issue,
Okay.
and it's not a class issue.
It's inherently
And
nothing.
that's the
Just to
issue.
be clear. It's inherently nothing. Most things are inherently nothing. It's how you perceive those things. This is an issue of perspective, right? I mean, you're acting as if there's there's something above that's determining what this is. Some godlike force that makes a determination that there's only one way of looking at this particular issue. And I'm saying that's nonsense.
So my question to you then, you want to spin this to a class issue to where
I don't want to spin it into anything. I'm looking at it in the viewpoints that are given. I'm saying I accept. This is the maddening thing about this. I accept your premise that there is an aspect of this that is entirely based on race and that needs to be regarded as such.
the whole thing is based on race.
I agree with your premise that there's a debt that needs to be owed, that needs to be balanced. I agree with both of your premises. You completely disagree with my premise that there's a class-based aspect to this, and you only want to look at it from the race-based aspect. And I'm saying
Because
that it is
why were black individuals in chains, and why was there Jim Crow against black individuals? Was it a class issue or was it a race issue?
It was a class issue. It was a class. They were
Wow.
using. Why do you think? Wait. Why do you think they were using black labor in that way? Meaning, they were put in slavery because, for the most part, it was this. Yes, there's an aspect to this because they were race. You can easily classify a person based on their race, but this became somewhat of a class issue when they were able to use the resources and expropriate those resources to the top by using free labor. I mean, they didn't do this for shits and giggles. I mean, part of this was done in order to maximize profit. Am I wrong?
So
Do you believe I'm wrong on this?
If this is a class issue, if this is all it is, this is a class issue.
I didn't say that's all there is.
Why-
That's wait. I never said that's all there is. I had over and over again
But
made
that's
the
your
point that
general
it's
premise.
more than one issue.
That's your general premise. That's your general premise. That this is it's mostly a class issue.
My general premise is that it goes into multiple issues. You can look at it through various lenses. That's my general position. I've never deviated from that position.
I just view this. They're not understanding this. Like, you understand it, but you're making it more complicated than what it is.
Okay.
Like,
I think the audience got a good idea of us bouncing back and forth.
I don't think. I think, like I said, this is really going to hurt your candidate
Okay.
because, I'm just telling your audience and the people that out here that this is just a little issue. It's going to continuously be talked about, and it's going to be mobilized to either.
You're casting this in a way that's not necessarily indicative of how I see it.
Listen. I'm not going against you. I'm not coming at you. I'm just telling you. I'm pre-warning you what's going on.
I don't think
just
you
like I told you. I told you 3 weeks ago, easily like a month ago, this was an issue. You didn't want to research it. You didn't bring it. Like, it's been going on like for the last couple of years.
John, I don't.
And now
think
this lecture style, it's a major issue.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not coming at you. It's just like I'm just explaining what's going on.
John, I don't think you're coming at me. I have people who come after me all the time, and those people are friends of the show. So, you can take the piss out of me all you want. That's not where I'm coming at. And I don't take, just to be clear, I haven't taken any of this personally. I find this to be a fucking fascinating argument. If you remember,
I do too.
the original premise of this show had to do with CNN setting up Bernie Sanders. The reparations conversation is taking over almost like an hour. I find this to be an amazing conversation. So if I thought it was a little issue, I wouldn't have spent an hour talking about it, nor would I have done other shows on it, nor would I have another show planned on it. So I don't think it's a little. I think this is fucking fascinating. I am stunned that this is even up for debate. So that it's not even that. I guess one point. I think people understood the thing. I just want to be very clear. I don't think you're coming at me at all. That's never the impression I took. Just because we're bouncing back and forth on a particular position doesn't necessarily mean that it's negative. It's just people are hashing out what they think and how they feel about the various issues that come up. That's all. I don't think it's bad. So no, if make your opinion known like everybody else makes their opinion known.
I'm telling you, where you go wrong at is when your premise of it's mainly a class issue. Like when you say that, you're going to get pushback. I'm just telling you, you're going to get pushback. People are going to look at you. You're just going to get it. I know you can take it.
I will absolutely.
It is what it is.
I would absolutely accept the pushback and decide I have no expectation of people agreeing with everything I say. My thing is I just need to be able to defend the position that I take. That's all. And I ask people to do the same, which is why I ask people to call in sometimes. I'm like, hey, call in, make your point, because I want to hear your point in a more full-throated way. But no, it's a political show, and I expect people to have various political dispositions that are different than my own, and to make those clearly and plainly. And I could be wrong. There's been shit that I've been wrong on. So, I actually call it for a reason. It wasn't because I'm ignoring the issue. In fact, I think the fact that I've been talking about it all this time gets across that I'm not ignoring the issue. And if I thought it was small or minor issue, I wouldn't bring it up. So, but thank you for calling in, John Hill. I hope I gave you the opportunity to get your opinion off. We did look up the ADOS stuff, by the way, so I don't want you to think that I just kind of blew it off and paid no attention to it. The context of me researching this, though, had to do with the argument of reparations, not necessarily the entirety of the movement. But nevertheless, I agree with part of your premise, I guess. I don't necessarily still fully know the disagreement, but I'll end it here. Thank you.
When you conflate it with the class issue, that's when it's like...
Fair enough. All right, I'm going to end it here because there's another caller. But John, thank you for calling, man.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye. Hello, what's your name and what's the topic?
It's Cardi B, man. I want to know why you don't talk about twerking in the club or Gucci diamond bag.
Don't tell me you've gotten my video, my twerking video. I make one every time I go to a country. I put my ass on the window of the country and I just go at it. The people love it.
Looks like I'm going to be busy for the rest of the night. Thank you for that.
The sad part is, that's true, by the way. That's absolutely true. There's an ass picture of France, and there's an ass picture of Italy, I think. That's floating somewhere. But yeah, it's unfortunately true. It's unfortunate.
All right, man. We'll just start talking about twerking in the club, and I think your numbers will go up. You have a great night.
I'll try that. I'll go for that. Thanks, man. All right. I think that was a lively, fucking fascinating discussion. What is it? Snort 2KY. I pretty much just disagree with Jamarl on UFOs. Given an opportunity system that lifted all poor would not have the backlash of 4 years to wipe out. Yeah, this is a politics thing. This is not necessarily a reality thing to me. U.S. citizenship is sufficient reparation, I believe. I disagree with you on that one, buddy. Like, you could have 400 years of slavery and 400 years of expropriating labor to one of the various races. And at the end of it, it's like, look, we're not going to give you anything for the labor that we got for free. What we will do, however, is allow you to have citizenship. Congratulations, you're welcome. That's cold comfort. That is cold fucking comfort. However you look at this issue, be it one of class or be it one of race or a little bit of both, that seems viciously unfair. It just does. I'm sorry. You look at the economic numbers and you see the disparity of wealth, and that disparity of wealth wasn't just magic. That disparity of wealth was based on a fundamentally racist system that was able to pull labor in one direction. And understand that there are whites that are poor and all this other stuff, but we're talking specifically about people who are descendants of slaves and who social standing, even though they might have had 10, 20, 30 years, social standing doesn't necessarily compare to the rest of the country in regards to the whole. and the opportunities that was afforded to people in the country of a various race. I don't think this idea of citizenship is fair. Come on. Rock Lee, Google the Just Act of 2017, Jewish reparations. I've heard of that, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, Germany gave reparations. But this is kind of my point on why I'm saying I agree with the premise. Countries, when they do very bad things, meaning governments, pay reparations for those things as a way of trying to mend the gap. I don't see why this is different. Honestly, I don't see why this would be different. Blacks are furloughed workers, pop reality. That's a way of putting it. United States citizenship is not equals freedom to have health care. Get prize. I disagree. Racist is not used vigorously enough. Paul BSO Gaming. I disagree with Jamarl that today's African Americans are owed reparations, but I agree with him on everything else. All right, let's see. Last caller. What's your name and what's the topic?
Yes, this is Scotty from Columbus, Ohio.
What's happening, man?
And
wait. Say the name one more time.
Scotty. Columbus, Ohio.
What's happening, Scotty?
Not much. I heard a little bit of the reparations conversation, and first off, I just want to say a lot of I don't know if you guys talked about Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, who were the co-founders of the hashtag or the movement, but I've been following the career for at least like the past few years, and they make a lot of good arguments in favor of reparations.
Yeah.
The problem is, like, I don't think when you like study like who's involved a little bit more, there's a lot of left to be desired. Like there's a lot of xenophobia involved in terms of how like they're cutting off themselves from other like Africans involved in the issue of reparations. There's
Wait, what do you mean? Say that one more time. You said they're cutting off the issues of Africans involved in reparations. Explain.
Okay, so if you're on these boards, if you're listening to a lot of the show,
now I know Yvette Carnell. I don't know the other gentleman, but I've seen Carnell's show at times.
Yeah, if you listen to the show, there's a lot like issues. Talk like Yvette Carnell did a show where she was responding to a African woman who wrote an article about her grandfather being involved in the slave trade,
right? And
she expounded on that and basically said that Africans helped sell American DLS into slavery. And like, there's a lot.
No, they did. Yeah, I mean, it's it was in some part it was an exchange. They didn't necessarily know what was taking place in the country, but they would catch soldiers, people, in these kind of intertribal wars, and they would give those over to slave traders for like
but not then. Alcohol, but not the entirety of the country is what I was saying.
Yes,
but like if you listen like far enough, and if you just like type in the hashtag and especially online, there's a lot of like it's really kind of like an experience to read. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of critique about foreign policy and how if they wanted reparations, then the fact that we're involved in these countries like Venezuela,
You're talking about like where does it end? Like, do we pay reparations to Iraq? Do we pay it to Afghanistan? Do we pay it to Syria? Do we pay it to all of the countries of Latin America that we've been toppling? Do we pay it to Vietnam? Like, where does it end?
Yeah. Like, if you're going to go down that road, then this country doesn't just owe a debt to the descendants of slaves. Like, we'll owe pretty much, and plus it'll basically it'll be a slippery slope for other nations owing people and like imperialism. like it'll basically restructure capitalism. That's not to say that.
But to be fair,
Yeah,
though,
that's
I mean,
yeah.
if
Oh, yeah, I agree. I agree with reparations.
well,
Like,
that's what I was gonna say. To be fair,
okay.
though, I mean, from the standpoint of African Americans that are descendants of slaves, their position, their political position, can't really take into account a certain degree of political fallout with regards to other nations, right? I mean, ultimately, if they're because I think their argument is sound. Ultimately, African Americans, there was a crime that was committed, and there was a debt that needs to be repaid based on what was committed. And I think your point is,
I agree.
you know, that's a slippery slope. Where does it end? I'm saying that they can't care about the fact that that's a slippery slope if that's their political position. Like, you know, if that's like Martin Luther King doing what he was doing in the United States, can't necessarily care that other nations may get destabilized if they start taking on his perspective. You know what I mean? He does what he does because it's for the right and for the good of the people who he's representing. I suppose ADOS is the same. My issue here is a political one, not necessarily a one with the with disagreement, if that makes sense.
Oh no, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm saying that if they're going to go about this, then the analysis needs to be broader, the reach needs to be broader, and they better be ready for the pushback that they're getting. It's like, I don't know if you saw the whole dust up with Joanne Reed.
I did the black thing where she said they need to get that white man off the campaign trail.
No.
Oh, that was a different one. That was a different one.
No,
what was the dust up?
No. I saw that too. It was basically she called the ADOS people Russian bots.
What?
Now that was
no
terrible.
way.
Yes. This was about 2 weeks ago. This was terrible. This was if they really wanted to like debate the issue, like just debate the issue. Don't call these people Russian bots. These are real people.
These are real people.
Real concerns.
She just doesn't want to deal with that. That's her left.
Yeah.
Like that's you know, Joanne Reed would never utter the term reparations. At least I don't think Joanne Reed would. I could be wrong. And Joanne Reed understands that any of her political candidates who she's supporting, meaning she's a Democrat, she's working at MSNBC, she's going to support whoever the Democratic candidate is. Her having to defend that may not necessarily be the easiest thing in the world when people start asking, what does it mean? Like I agree with Sanders on this. What does it mean? Even the caller, John Hill, he kind of made the point that they don't know what it means yet. They need to research the issue. Fair enough. But the technical details are going to be the thing that matters. I guess that's the thing. At least that's what I think it's going to be.
I will also say that I'm not a Sanders supporter. I'm actually thinking about either voting for either Jamal Thomas.
Mm-hmm. He's running for president.
If he, whether or not he runs or not, I'll just put
his
either
name
of their names
okay.
in. Yeah, But I've seen the pushback on Sanders' answer reparations. I just gotta say this: that answer wasn't necessarily perfect, but no other Democratic candidate actually really has a plan to actually do that. The only one I seen was Marion Wilson Williamson. That $100 billion number
nothing.
is
like that's a pittance. It's like, what is that going to do? Yeah.
And what this whole thing reveals to me is that the Obama years were an abject failure for Black America, and so after that, there's been a lot of people, particularly in Black community, some on the Black left, coming to terms with that. And I think they're jumping on this whole thing about reparations as like a way of showing their political strength to the Democratic Party to say, look, we matter, and you've taken us for granted for far too long.
Yes.
And if you don't put our issues on the table, we will walk.
Yes,
and
that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. I mean, you had the Obama years, and they saw Obama throw his body on the fire to protect Wall Street while, Black wealth gets destroyed through the housing crisis. And you get to this feeling of Black Americans, and I've talked, being Black American, I tend to talk to other Black Americans. particularly people who are political, making this point. I remember one guy told me, I don't think we were ready for a black president. Now, he said that because he was making this point of, during the Obama years, Republicans attacked him so viciously and attacked him on issues of race and things, these kind of veiled racist things, like call him a gorilla and all this other stuff, or Michelle Obama's a man and all this stuff, just gross racist stuff. And African Americans reflexively defended him. Like, even when the defense, it was like, we're going to protect him because, he's under attack viciously by these other elements on things that go beyond just politics. By the same token, after that, though, you start looking around and be like, well, wait a minute, where do we get out these years? And what do we get for the support of the Democratic Party to the tune of like 90, 95%? And you start asking this very basic question of, they're taking me for granted. Like, it's like us being part of the Democratic Party, the only real benefit is that the Republican Party have creatures that are dwelling in their basements that we're terrified of, and that we don't necessarily want them in political power. And the Democratic Party knows this and use the fact that there are crocodiles and there are creatures in that party to scare the shit out of African Americans to remain within the Democratic Party. The same holds true for gays and Hispanics. So you have a party that has been able to maintain the integrity of itself because everybody is scared of who's in the other party. You know what I mean? But at a certain point, that starts to wear thin, and it's like, all right, they're taking me for granted. I think the ADOS is one of those things of pushing back on the being taken for granted stuff. You're going to attend to our issues. You're not going to ignore our issues. You're going to attend to our issues. This is kind of what I'm saying. They're not wrong on this. Like other groups aggregate together in order to have some kind of political clout. And from the standpoint of African Americans, trying to make this distinction of, no, not just minorities, but African Americans have a unique relationship with this country, and that unique relationship should be honored and recognized. I don't think they're wrong. I guess my annoyance with this issue is, I agree with the premise, and I'm getting attacked because I don't agree with the premise in the exact way to which they're putting it. But still, it's the issue becomes political, and in my head, it's what are the objectives of the movement itself? And certainly some of the objectives have to be some level of redistribution of wealth. Just
another issue that, and I want to end with this, another issue that I might be afraid of is also you'll have a number of people trying to co-opt it in certain ways. Like, I don't know if you saw the interaction that Ann Coulter had with both Yvette Carnell, Tony Moore, and Tariq Nasheed on this issue.
No, I haven't.
You just, like I was saying, you gotta look this stuff up because there's a lot going on and involved with this movement where there's people who are quote unquote involved with the ADOS movement who have different interests. Like, I think Yvette is sincere with what she believes and what she's doing. I just think that there's too much into it, and the analysis needs to be broadened out because it's in danger of getting co-opted by people who will use the immigration issue to sort of like stoke up divisions, like Ann Coulter,
for political
Donald Trump.
Like using
yeah.
And by the way, they are going to use that. Like the moment Sanders ran from that question, and he might have answered that question inelegantly, but he ran for that question because he understands that's a hot rail. I'm just saying, the ADOS may have a certain degree of sway and may be able to push for certain things, but African Americans make up 13% of this country, and this may be a minority majority nation in 2050, but this is 2019. This is not 2050, and if you're trying to get certain political objectives accomplished, but you're taking on one political objective that is radioactive from the standpoint of white Americans in the country, you're positioning yourself to lose the general election. Like it's at least that's my thinking anyway. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
No problem, man.
Have a good one. All right, guys. This show has been going on for 2 hours. And this show originally was going to be a 10-15 minute show talking about CNN. And this has ended up into a strong thing for reparations. Sorry, JT, I don't have the hats for you. My fire went out when my husband died in our house fire in 8/26/10/22. What do you mean you don't have that? What? Where did that come from? Where did that come from? ADOS needs to ask candidates if they support HR 40 instead of asking you support reparations. Oh, yes, good. Bernie, better framing elsewhere. Yeah, because it makes it very clear on what it is. It's like feminism. What does feminism mean? Depends on who you're talking to, right? And people have different ideas on what that means. So, Oz whistles, reparations sounds like a lazy way out. What? How does that sound like a lazy way out? I don't... Yeah, that's grossly unfair. I think that's grossly unfair. This is like dying uninsured. Yeah, that's grossly unfair. But we've hashed this out. We've talked about this, and I think we all have our positions. I just want a mule. Can I have a mule? They said no ponies. Oh God, that's funny. Jamal, you're leaving us, but there's 192 of us. This show has been going on for hours. Just a man. And not just that, I had like 4 shows on top of this that I wanted to do. I never this. Oh wait, we have more. Cardi B, Jay. Here we are, Cardi B. Jay, you never mentioned the twerking in the club. How you gonna stand up to the hoes if you ain't even mentioning twerking in the club? Sell out. We gotta get you diamonds and Gucci bags. Oh, you ain't no hoe rapper. You're a square. Don't even twerk in the club. Jesus Christ. If you ain't gonna talk about twerking in the club, you ain't black. How about diamonds and $1 million record deals in my... Oh, hoe. Okay, you're just calling me a hoe, the Virgin Mary. Chink versus WikiLeaks plus Buzzsaw and TYT. Chink is gonna be hurting. That's another one of the things that I want to talk about. Aaron Matei and Cenk Uygur. This is gonna be a long night. I can see it now. This is gonna be a long night. I feel like I have to I can't keep up. There's too much news. There's always too much news. Guys, thank you for assisting the show. Trudy, I don't know what this means. Sorry, JT, I don't have the hats for you. My fire went out when my husband died in our house in 8/26/2010. God, I'm so sorry about your husband passing in the house fire. Did you do Warren's flip-flop when the campaign fell? Oh, yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I did an entire video on that. Yes, I did. I think addressing poverty would be the best place to start. Trudy, I agree with you. All right. Trudy, I don't know what that point means. I love it when you have a long night, JT. Okay, yeah. Yeah, fair enough. This is going to be somewhat of a long night. I have a bunch of shows. So, I will see you in probably 10-15 minutes. Guys, I appreciate all of you showing up for this, and this conversation has been going for 2 hours, and we've still up at 191, so that's not bad. Jamal has a diamond-studded jock strap with initials PB. With initials PB on it. Oh, that's nasty and funny. I wish I had some Trudy donation power, and then my voice wouldn't be a joke. Your voice isn't a joke, Lisa Carlette. I tried to get you to call into the show. Oh, God. I literally tried to get you to call into the show. How is your voice a joke? All right. I'll leave it on that. Lisa Carletti's voice a joke, even though I tried to get her to call into the show and I opened the phone call specifically for her to call in, and she would not call in. So, I'm just saying. If we have socialism without reparations, we will continue to have white supremacy and divisions among the working class. We did it again. We turned Jamal 15-minute to 2-hour video. Congrats, everyone who worked. In all seriousness, Lisa, I opened the phone lines for you to call in. I had a severe back and forth with you, and I kept asking a very specific question on what am I saying that you disagree with, and there was never an answer to that question. And even in opening phone lines to give you the opportunity to call in, you never took that opportunity to call in which case John Hill called in, and you could say he took your voice, but indeed it was your voice to take because you didn't necessarily call in. has nothing to do with you giving donations. I picked up your point of view, and I literally allowed that to take over the point of the show when the show went into the conversation of reparations as opposed to Bernie Sanders. Let's be objective and let's be honest. I'm just saying. Just saying. Don't try to play me like I wouldn't call. I explained to you about my reception near the fucking naval base. Okay, fair enough. Well, I don't know what else I can do. And in this case, what's his name called in? Reform versus revolution. She lives near a naval base or someplace that has bad reception. Fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. I don't know why you think I would remember that, but fair enough. John Hill did a great job. Thank you. He didn't take my voice. He used this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Fair enough. If John Hill did a great job, then how are you... I guess my point in this is, you're making this pity saw case as if you were ignored. I'm saying that is nonsense. It's true, I didn't remember that you were near a naval base. Fair enough. And that otherwise you would have called in. Again, fair enough. But I don't know how you were ignored when I'm having a conversation with you right now. And not just having a conversation with you right now, I even took the original premise and allowed that to transform the narrative that's taking place in the show. So, just saying. It's race related, but it's class systemic. I think it's both. Trudy, I'm having PBJ for dinner. This is why this shit matters. It does matter, but okay, I'm not going to go over this again. I guess at no point have you explained what you disagree with. John Hill did a great job in trying to make those distinctions, but I think that distinction is extraordinarily shallow since I agree with your premise right off the bat. If you want to have a very specific way of looking at this, fair enough, but there are other ways of looking at things. They're usually not just one point of view. The show has been changed to have your point of view and to go back and forth. So this notion that you were being ignored is, again, utter nonsense. And the phone lines themselves were open, even though I didn't necessarily remember that you couldn't call in. John Hill did it on your behalf. So I'm just saying. Lisa Collette is being sarcastic. She wants the entire movement to revolve around her. Nobody else did. Nobody do anything until she's taken care of. Very representative of the whole. Reparation. I don't think that's representative of the whole. I don't know. The original premise, like I said, I agree with. And in this show, I think I've made two arguments because I think both arguments are right. Actually, three. One was political. That reparations, to some degree, are owed. You've committed a remarkable offense. And from a class standpoint, you can see the works of that offense in the outcomes. I don't think it's wrong. It's just, apparently we just disagree on something that I'm unclear on. I guess, what's his name said we disagree that there's any part of this has anything to do with class. I think that's insane. But whatever. He came on. He made his case. And I appreciate him doing so. All right. I'm going to end this. This has gone on for 2 hours and 3 minutes. So I'm straight and I have a big boy crush on Bernie Sanders. He talks the right kind of dirty to me, to the establishment. That's funny. That's funny. Bill Bradley, race is more than a social construct. Your doctor wants to know your race because the different races are prone to certain illnesses than others. Fair enough, but come on. Is it more than a construct? And is that an argument that it's more than a construct? 99.9% of human genetics are the same. I mean, so similar that, if I'm not mistaken, unless this has changed, geneticists can't look at your genetics and tell whether you're African or whether you're white, meaning if they were looking at your DNA. You may have modicum of differences just based on predisposition to maybe certain illnesses or those things. But even those things, to some degree, can have, what am I looking for? A societal reason. Like, they found that in areas of famine, I think this was going back into Ireland, if I'm not mistaken, when they were able to keep track of the genetics of the people who were involved in that going in several generations, that the weaknesses that presented because of the famine showed up in the generations several on. Even those generations were far removed from it, they still had the weaknesses associated with the famine. It is possible that there are things that show up in our genetics that are entirely based on culture or entirely based on societal reason for it. But fair enough. I don't know if that's entirely an argument against that it's more than a social construct. Yes, I mean, obviously somebody is, you can see that there's a color difference, the melanin content in an individual's skin and where that person is or was located is different. So fair enough. But is the small genetic difference that may cause one person to be predisposed to one disease as opposed to the other, is that enough of a reason for you to say that it's just, it's just only a social construct? And what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? I don't know. I'm in the mindset it's a social construct. I'm just saying. All right, I'm going to end this. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. I'm sorry, Lisa, that you didn't get what you wanted out of this. But like you said, John Hill gave his opinion, and the public can make its own lineup of what it thinks. And who's more right. All right, guys. You may see me. God, it's 10 o'clock. You may see me in a few minutes. I need to check on my wife, make sure she's doing all right. And I'll see you guys in a few. Thanks, all. And